He killed 70 men on a single stone. He burned 1,000 people alive in a tower. He ruled Israel for 3 years. And the Bible never once says God chose him. This is Abimelech. His story ends with a woman, a millstone, and a dying man more worried about his reputation than his own life. But to understand how one man could do all of this, we need to go back 3,000 years. The Book of Judges, Chapter 9. It is one of the longest and most politically complex chapters in the entire Hebrew Bible. And it begins not with a villain, but with a question. Who will lead Israel now? Gideon had just died. He was one of Israel's greatest judges, a military hero, the man God used to defeat the Midianites with just 300 soldiers. By the time he died, Gideon had 70 sons from many wives, as powerful men of that era often had. But there was one more, one who was never truly counted among the others. His name was Abimelech. His mother was a concubine from Shechem, one of the most important cities in Canaan. Abimelech grew up carrying his father's name, but never his father's recognition. That wound becomes a weapon. After Gideon's death, Abimelech goes to Shechem, directly to his mother's family. He says something very calculated. I am your bone and your flesh. He reminds them of shared blood. He is half of them. Then he makes his proposal. Why should 70 men rule over you? Why not one? Why not me? The people of Shechem agreed. They gave him 70 pieces of silver from the treasury of their local temple, the temple of Baal-berith. With that silver, Abimelech hired men the text describes as worthless and reckless. He went to his father's house, and he killed his brothers, all 70 of them, on a single stone. One escaped, the youngest son of Gideon, a boy named Jotham. Before fleeing, he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim, the mountain of blessing in Israelite tradition. And from there, he told a parable, the first political parable in recorded Hebrew literature. Trees were looking for a king. The olive tree refused. The fig tree refused. The vine refused. Each one had something valuable to offer the world, and none of them wanted the title. Then the bramble spoke, the thorn bush, worthless and dangerous, the kind of plant that starts wildfires. The bramble said yes, and Jotham declared, if Abimelech is truly what Shechem deserves, let fire come from him and devour you, and let fire from you devour him. Then Jotham ran, because he knew what was coming. To understand why this story still matters, you need to understand the world where it happened. This is the early Iron Age, roughly 3,100 years ago. Egypt had just lost its grip on Canaan. The great empires of the Bronze Age had collapsed. There was no unified Israelite kingdom yet. No palace, no standing army. The land was a collection of tribes and city-states, each one filling the vacuum left by fallen powers. Shechem was not just any city. It sat in the narrow pass between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, where every major north-to-south road through Canaan ran. It was where Abraham had built one of his first altars, where Joshua had gathered all Israel to renew the covenant with God. Shechem was sacred ground, and it was strategically priceless. For over a century, archaeologists have been excavating the site known as Tel Balata, the ruins of ancient Shechem. What they found is remarkable. They uncovered the stone foundations of a massive temple, right where the text says the temple of Baal-berith stood, the very temple whose treasury funded Abimelech's rise. And in the Iron Age destruction layers at that site, researchers found evidence of a sudden and catastrophic fire. A burn so severe it has no parallel in the site's history, until the American archaeologist G. Ernest Wright, who led the major excavations at Shechem in the mid-20th century, documented this layer in detail. He noted that the physical evidence pointed to a violent, rapid destruction event. This is not mythology. The fire still left its mark. The stones remember. Abimelech ruled for 3 years. Then something began to unravel. The people of Shechem turned against him. A man named Gaul arrived in the city, began speaking publicly against Abimelech. and stirred the population against him. Abimelech crushed the rebellion. He destroyed Shechem, burned the survivors inside the city tower, and moved on to the next city, Thebez. Same plan, but at Thebez, a woman was standing at the top of the tower wall. She dropped a millstone on his head. Abimelech did not die immediately. He had time to speak one final command. He told his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that no one can say a woman killed me." The armor-bearer obeyed, and Abimelech died. That final request has fascinated scholars for centuries. Why does this matter so much to him? With a broken skull and seconds left to live, his greatest concern is the version of the story that gets told. Some scholars read this as a straightforward reflection of ancient warrior culture. In the societies of the ancient Near East, being killed by a woman carried deep social shame for a male soldier. His request, they argue, was culturally predictable, not psychologically unique. Others believe the text is making a deliberate literary statement. The story begins with Abimelech using his mother, a Canaanite woman, to access the power that funded his rise. It ends with an unnamed woman ending that same power. The symmetry is too precise to be accidental. Some historians suggest this was an intentional theological design, a moral architecture built into the narrative itself. The one who used a woman to rise was brought down by a woman in the end. A third reading focuses on the broader argument of the book of Judges as a whole. Abimelech is the only figure in the entire book who seizes power without any divine appointment. No angel appears to him, no Spirit of God comes upon him, no call, no vision, no mission. Some biblical scholars describe him as the anti-judge, a negative example placed at the center of the book to show what leadership without God actually produces. And so his death is not just a story moment, it is a verdict. The bramble had promised shade, but a bramble cannot provide shade. It can only burn. What makes Abimelech different from other biblical antagonists is how recognizable he is. He is not a foreign invader. He is not a supernatural enemy. He is a man shaped by a wound he never chose. Born into a household where his value was conditional, where he carried his father's blood but never received his father's blessing. That absence, the silence of a father who never fully acknowledged him, becomes the engine of everything that follows. Researchers who study authoritarian behavior describe a consistent pattern. When a person cannot earn legitimacy, they manufacture it. When belonging is denied, some respond by eliminating those who remind them of what they were denied. Abimelech does not ask to be accepted. He removes everyone who would have been accepted instead. Notice also how he builds his coalition. By using silver from Shechem's own temple treasury to fund his rise, he implicates the city's leadership before a single brother is dead. They cannot expose him without exposing themselves. Social psychologists call this pre-commitment entrapment. You bind your allies through shared wrongdoing so completely that turning against you becomes self-destruction. And yet, in his final moment, none of this power matters. What matters to him is the story, not survival. The story. The fear of being remembered the wrong way, of having your story told by someone you did not choose, is something nearly every person has felt. Most of us never act on it with violence, but the root of that fear is universal. This is why these ancient texts keep speaking, not because they are simple moral lessons, but because the psychology inside them is still walking around in the modern world. Different names, different circumstances, the same wound. Abimelech became exactly what he always wanted to be, the first man in Israel's history to hold the title of king. He held it for 3 years, and his story ends with his city in ashes and an unnamed woman holding the instrument of his defeat. Jotham's words came true. The bramble became king. The bramble burned everything, including itself. The book of Judges never tells us what happened to Jotham after he fled. We only know he climbed the mountain of blessing, spoke the truth, and disappeared. Some voices do not wait to be proven right. They speak, and they leave the rest to time. If these ancient stories move something in you, if you believe that Scripture holds more depth than we were ever taught, then this channel was made for you. Leave a like if this episode made you see the Bible differently. Subscribe to Unsolved, because there are more stories waiting, and most of them have never been told this way.